I thought I was just fixing an old air conditioner, but the way she watched me that day, the way her voice softened when she asked for my number, it felt like something far warmer was beginning. It started on one of those afternoons when the heat feels like it has a personal grudge against you. The air outside shimmered, cicadas droned in the distance, and I was already sticky with sweat before I even left my place. I got a call, not from a close friend, not from family, but from someone I only knew through a friend circle. "Could you take a look at my air conditioner? It's acting up." Honestly, I almost said no. I wasn't an expert, just handy enough to figure out the basics. But there was something in her tone, a blend of polite request and quiet desperation, that made me agree. I figured it would be a quick fix, in and out, and that would be the end of it. When I pulled up to her house, the first thing I noticed was how well kept everything looked. A small garden framed the front door, flowers blooming despite the heat. I rang the bell, and then she appeared, and I swear, for a moment, the heat outside didn't matter anymore. She was nothing like what I had pictured. A woman in her early 40s, graceful in a way that only time can shape. There was a calm strength in her posture, but her smile softened everything. She wore something simple, a light blouse, her hair loosely tied back, but there was elegance in the details, like the way a strand of hair had escaped and brushed against her cheek. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice warm, carrying that unexplainable mixture of confidence and vulnerability. Stepping inside her home, I was struck by the shift in atmosphere. The air was warmer than it should have been, but the space itself carried a coolness of its own. The faint scent of lavender hung in the air. Family photographs lined the hallway, the frames polished but not showy. A shelf of books, a few old records stacked by the player, every detail spoke of a life lived thoughtfully. She led me toward the AC unit with a small laugh. "I've tried everything I could, but it just keeps fighting me. You'll probably do better than I did." I crouched down to take a look, tools in hand, and for a while, all I focused on was the quiet hum of the machine, the click of screws, the stubborn filter that refused to budge. But even then, I was aware of her. Not in a distracting way, but in the sense that her presence filled the room. She didn't hover nervously. Instead, she leaned casually against the doorframe, watching with a gentle curiosity. Every now and then, she offered me water or asked if I needed a rag. Her bracelets chimed softly when she moved. Each time I glanced back, I caught her smiling, not just politely, but in a way that made me wonder if she was seeing more than just a guy fiddling with wires. And that's when I realized this wasn't just another errand. Something about this woman, about the way she carried herself, had already begun to change the air around me. The AC was stubborn. The kind of problem that wouldn't give in easily. I wiped the back of my hand across my forehead, more from nerves than from the actual heat. She stood nearby, not too close, not hovering, but present in a way that made me feel every move I made mattered. "Do you need anything? A screwdriver? Maybe a ladder?" she asked, her voice calm, light, almost playful. I shook my head. "No, I think I've got it. Just give me a second to figure out what's going on here." She nodded, and I caught the faintest smile tugging at her lips before she leaned back against the wall. Her posture was relaxed, one arm crossed loosely, the other holding a glass of water that caught the light from the window. Every time she shifted, her bracelet chimed softly, a small sound that seemed to echo in the quiet of the room. I tried to stay focused on the wires and filters in front of me, but there was no denying it. I was aware of her watching. Not in a judgmental way, not impatient, but attentively, as though she found something quietly interesting about the way I worked. At one point, she walked closer, setting the glass down on the table beside me. "You must be burning up in this heat," she said. Her words were ordinary, but the way she said them carried a kind of softness, like she was speaking less to the room and more directly to me. I thanked her, reaching for the glass. For a second, our fingers brushed, a fleeting touch, but enough to send a quiet ripple through me. I told myself not to read too much into it. Still, I couldn't stop myself from noticing how her eyes lingered a fraction longer than necessary, as though she had felt it too. The AC groaned, then sputtered, the blades turning sluggishly. I muttered under my breath, leaning in closer, determined to make it cooperate. Behind me, I heard the faint sound of her laugh, warm, amused, not mocking. "Sorry," she said quickly. "You just look so determined, like you're negotiating with it." Her laugh was disarming, pulling a smile out of me before I could help it. "Sometimes machines respond better to patience than force," I joked back. "Wise words," she said, her tone quieter now, her gaze steady. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged, comfortable, but laced with something unspoken. I could feel it building, a subtle tension that made the room feel warmer than before. When the AC finally stirred back to life with a low hum, I let out a breath of relief. She clapped lightly, teasing, "See? It just needed your patience." I laughed, but my chest felt heavier than the moment deserved. Because underneath the laughter, beneath the ordinary exchange, something else was happening, something I couldn't quite define yet. And as I packed up my tools, I caught her eyes again. She was still smiling, but behind that smile was a flicker of something deeper, something that made me wonder if she, too, had felt the shift in the air. When the steady hum of the AC filled the room again, relief washed over us both. I straightened up, brushing the dust from my hands, and she exhaled like a weight had been lifted. "Finally," she said with a smile. "I thought I'd have to live in a sauna for the rest of summer." I laughed, but before I could gather my things to leave, she added, almost quickly, "Would you like some iced tea? You've done more than enough to earn it." Something in her tone told me it wasn't just politeness. It was an invitation, not just to sit, but to stay. I followed her into the kitchen, where the air felt cooler, softer, even before the AC's work could fully reach it. She poured 2 glasses, the sound of ice clinking gently as it slid into the glasses. When she handed me mine, her fingers brushed against mine again. This time, neither of us looked away immediately. We sat at the small kitchen table, sunlight filtering through sheer curtains, catching on the glass and scattering patterns across the surface. At first, our talk was casual. The weather, how unreliable appliances always seem to fail in the worst moments. I told her a story about a car I once spent an entire afternoon trying to fix, and she laughed, tilting her head just slightly as she listened. But slowly, the conversation shifted. She asked me about school, about what I wanted to do. Her questions weren't shallow, she really wanted to know. And when she spoke about her own life, it wasn't rehearsed or polished. She admitted she'd been feeling a little stuck lately, like life was moving around her while she stayed still. Her words carried a quiet honesty, the kind that doesn't usually come out in the first meeting. I found myself leaning in as she spoke, not just because I wanted to hear her better, but because I wanted to be closer. She rested her elbow on the table, her chin lightly against her hand, her eyes steady on mine. And for a moment, it felt like the world outside, the noise, the heat, the rushing of time, didn't exist. There was a pause, a soft silence that felt anything but empty. I traced my finger along the condensation of the glass, searching for something to say, but words felt unnecessary. She seemed to notice, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "You're easy to talk to," she said finally. It was a simple sentence, but the way she said it left me quietly shaken. Because I felt the same, like we had skipped the layers people usually hide behind. As we sat there, the air cooler now, I realized something had shifted. What started as a favor, just fixing an AC, had turned into something else. A connection. Not dramatic, not obvious, but undeniable. And as her hand accidentally brushed mine again when she reached for her glass, I didn't move away. Neither did she. The glasses of iced tea sat empty between us, the condensation leaving faint rings on the wooden table. The AC was running smoothly now, a low hum that filled the silence without interrupting it. For a while, neither of us moved. It wasn't the stillness of strangers, it was the kind of quiet that comes when 2 people are comfortable, but don't quite know how to step into what they're both feeling. Eventually, I pushed back my chair. "Well, I guess I should get going." She nodded, though there was the faintest hesitation in her eyes. She rose with me, smoothing her blouse as though giving her hands something to do. We walked together toward the front door, each step slower than it needed to be, as if drawing out the moment. When we reached the door, I set my tools down and turned to her with a polite smile. "I'm glad it's working again." Hopefully, it won't give you any more trouble. She laughed softly. If only things in life were that easy to fix. Her voice carried a quiet weight, a glimpse of something deeper, but before I could respond, she shook her head slightly, brushing it off. I slipped my shoes back on, and that's when I felt it, the shift. She was standing closer than before, her fingers lightly clasped around her phone, her gaze flickering from the screen to my face. She seemed to wrestle with something, the silence between us stretching. Finally, she spoke. Would you mind if I got your number? She said it casually enough, in case the AC acts up again, but her tone betrayed her. There was a softness to it, almost cautious, like she was opening a door but leaving me the choice of whether to walk through. For a second, I just looked at her, my heart beating a little faster than it should. I could see the quiet vulnerability in her expression, the way her thumb rested nervously against the edge of her phone, the way her eyes didn't quite meet mine at first. I smiled. Sure. Relief washed over her face, though she covered it with a small laugh, handing me her phone. As I typed in my number, I became acutely aware of her standing so close, the faint scent of lavender again, the warmth of her presence beside me. When I handed the phone back, her fingers brushed mine deliberately this time, slower, almost testing. Thank you, she said softly. There was something unspoken in the air, something both of us felt but neither dared to name. I picked up my tools, lingering just a moment longer. Her eyes met mine then, steady and searching, as though she wanted to say more, but chose silence instead. As I stepped outside into the heat, the air felt different, not oppressive anymore, but charged. I knew, as I walked away, that her request for my number wasn't really about an air conditioner. And I couldn't help but wonder where that simple exchange might lead. That night, I lay in bed, the room dim except for the faint glow of my phone screen on the nightstand. I hadn't expected to hear from her again so soon. Honestly, I thought she'd wait until something went wrong with the AC before reaching out. But there it was, a message. Simple at first. Thanks again for today. I really appreciate it. I smiled, typing back something equally casual. No problem. Glad I could help. I thought that would be it. But a minute later, another notification lit up the screen. Honestly, you saved me. I was about ready to throw that thing out the window. Her words made me laugh quietly in the silence of my room. I replied, joking back, and within moments, we'd slipped into a conversation that had nothing to do with air conditioners at all. She asked me what I liked to do in my spare time. I told her about the books I'd been reading, the music I played when I couldn't sleep. She sent back a photo of a half-read novel on her nightstand, saying she always read the last chapter first just to know how things ended. I teased her about it, and she teased me back. The minutes stretched into hours. Our messages went from light and playful to something more personal. She admitted she'd been feeling a little restless lately, like life had been moving faster than she could keep up. I found myself telling her things I rarely said out loud, about feeling unsure of where I was heading, about the pressure of expectations I didn't always know how to meet. What surprised me most wasn't what we said, but how natural it felt to say it. The conversation flowed as though it had always been waiting, just beneath the surface. Every time I set the phone down, another buzz pulled me back in. It was as if neither of us wanted the night to end. The world outside was quiet, but between us, there was a current alive and pulsing, carried through words on a screen. At one point, she sent, "You're easy to talk to." I didn't expect that. I stared at those words longer than I should have, my chest tightening in a way that wasn't entirely comfortable, but not unpleasant either. It was the kind of message that meant more than it said. By the time I finally noticed the clock glowing past midnight, I knew sleep wasn't going to come easily. I set the phone down, but her words lingered in the dark, as if her voice was still there, speaking softly beside me. And that's when it hit me, this wasn't just gratitude. This wasn't about fixing an air conditioner. This was about connection, growing in the quiet hours when the world was asleep. And somehow, I knew this was only the beginning. A few days passed before she reached out again. This time, the message was short. The AC sounds a little strange. Maybe you could check it. I almost laughed when I read it. Something told me the AC was fine. Still, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. When I arrived, she greeted me at the door with that same warm smile. The house felt cooler this time, almost too cool, confirming what I already suspected. But she didn't mention it. Instead, she led me in and offered coffee, as though the machine was just an excuse. We sat in the living room, mugs in hand, and the conversation flowed easily again. She asked about my week, told me about a project at work that had been weighing on her. We laughed over small things, the kind of laughter that leaves behind a comfortable silence afterward. The more we talked, the less the AC mattered. My tools stayed untouched by the door, and instead, I found myself noticing other things: the way her hair caught the afternoon light, the way her fingers tapped lightly against the rim of her mug when she was thinking. At one point, she leaned forward, reaching to set her mug down on the table. As she did, her knee brushed against mine. Neither of us moved. The touch was small, accidental, yet it lingered in the space between us like a quiet admission. I felt the shift immediately. The air seemed to thicken, not with heat, but with something heavier, something unspoken. My chest tightened, my thoughts a blur of curiosity and restraint. She seemed to feel it too. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, her hand hesitating just slightly before resting near mine on the couch. Not touching, just close enough that I could sense the warmth radiating from her skin. Our conversation slowed, the pauses stretching longer. I found myself watching her lips as she spoke, then forcing my gaze back to her eyes. She noticed, I could tell she did, but she didn't look away. For a moment, I thought about leaning closer, about closing the distance that had been shrinking since the moment we first met. But hesitation anchored me. Respect. The difference in our ages. The uncertainty of whether I was imagining what I felt. She broke the silence with a soft laugh, not nervous, but gentle. "You're quieter today," she said. I smiled faintly. "Maybe I just enjoy listening to you." Her eyes softened at that, her lips curving into a smile that felt more like acknowledgement than amusement. The room was quiet again, except for the faint hum of the AC. I knew then that this wasn't about machines or excuses. It was about being near each other, about the comfort and tension tangled together in every shared glance and every small touch. And though nothing was said outright, the closeness spoke louder than words ever could. The afternoon slipped away more quickly than I realized. We had talked for hours without once looking back at the untouched AC unit. The coffee had long gone cold, and the sunlight outside had softened to a golden hue, spilling across the living room floor. Eventually, I knew I had to leave. Responsibilities, time, the outside world, all waiting for me. Yet a part of me resisted standing up, as if moving would break the fragile spell that had settled between us. "I should go," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between hesitation and hope. Then she nodded, standing with me. "I'll walk you out." The hallway felt different now, heavier somehow. Each step toward the door seemed to echo the weight of everything we hadn't said out loud. When we reached it, I set my mug on the counter and picked up my tools, though neither of us pretended that fixing the AC had been the reason for my visit this time. We stood by the door for a moment, neither reaching for the handle. The silence stretched again, that same charged quiet we had felt in the living room. She looked at me then, not a quick glance, but a steady, searching gaze that seemed to strip away all the barriers we'd both been holding. Her hand moved first. She reached out and touched my arm lightly, just above the elbow. It wasn't much, a simple touch, gentle, but it carried all the weight of the hours we'd shared. "I'm glad you came today," she said softly. The words were simple, but her tone wasn't. It held warmth, gratitude, and something more. Something unspoken but clear. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "I'm glad too." Her hand lingered, her fingers brushing the fabric of my sleeve before slowly pulling away. In that pause, in that single hesitation, I knew I couldn't leave without saying something. I began, then stopped, searching for the right words. Finally, I let the truth come out, unpolished but real. "I'd like to see you again. Not just for the AC." For a moment, she said nothing. Then, slowly, her lips curved into a smile, small but radiant. Her eyes softened, the kind of look that reaches beyond the surface. "I'd like that too," she whispered. The air shifted between us then, lighter but still charged. There was no dramatic gesture, no rushed embrace. Just the quiet certainty of two people standing at the edge of something new, both acknowledging it without the need for labels or promises. As I stepped outside, the evening air met me, warm but no longer stifling. Behind me, she lingered at the doorway, her hand resting lightly on the frame as she watched me go. And though we hadn't defined what came next, I knew one thing for certain: this was not the end. It was the beginning of something neither of us had planned for, but both of us were willing to explore.